everyone, my name is Alexandra, and today we're going to be taking a look at reality in the form of playing a board game. The point of the game is to demonstrate our polarized reality of dark versus light, or the false light, and how these sides are actually two wings of the same bird, forever braided together to accomplish a shared goal. This is a very visual video, so you'll want to watch this one instead of just listening. That being said, the game will consist of 3 parts. Foundational concepts, more abstract concepts, then finally how they apply to reality. Each square on the board game builds on the last, so please don't skip ahead. This video is not meant to oversimplify these concepts, but instead give an overview of them so you can research for yourself and share this with others who are genuinely interested. Finally, this is probably not a freshman level researcher video. I think it's going to be more of a junior or senior level. Links to all of the articles and videos that I reference are in the description below. I have a BitChute account, a backup YouTube account, a Telegram account at I'm Probably Alexandra, and an Odysee account. You can find those links below. You can also find me on Instagram and support me on Ko-fi and Venmo or the PayPal link in my Instagram link tree. Okay, all that out of the way, let's get started. Thank you all for joining me in this video today. My friend's here to help me with some voiceover, but for privacy's sake, he's requested not to be on camera. We've explored some of these topics in lots of my other videos, like my mind game series, but this video discusses the specifics of this dualistic game and how it's used to manipulate our minds, and also what you can do to stop playing. I thought we all could take a look at what I call the mind game. This is the mind game. The powers that be have constructed an existence based on what they want you and I to believe, and how we participate in the game. They make the rules.
You need to know how to resist, because if you don't know anything about how the powers that be operate, you're not going to do a very good job resisting.
This entire structure was discussed in part 7 of my programmed series. Decisions are generally thought to be made via politics and money. However, they're actually made by the organizations, private suppliers, and individuals in control of the politics and who possess the power to manipulate money. It's a rigged game you can't win. Some people call it the Matrix, but that's not actually the whole story. Keeping with the Matrix film analogy, the Matrix makes up the esoteric world that many who take the blue pill never see. The red pill allows them to see past the exoteric and understand the layers behind the skin of the world. But that's it. It does not offer any answers, a solution, or any form of action required to get out of the game. You're just painfully aware that you're in the game. That's why we're going to discuss the mind game. And this is a game of duality, of poles, where there are 2 sides, dark and light, and the 2 sides reinforce themselves. Which side are you on? If you said neither, spoiler alert, you're correct. Why is it important to learn how this game is played? Because it makes up our shared reality. We live in it whether we play the game or not. If you're unaware of the game going on, how do you know you're not participating? By knowing the rules of the game and the way it works, you won't be deceived into playing any longer. This is a spiritual battlefield with eternal consequences. And if you don't know what you're up against, you won't be able to defend yourself or help anyone else out of this deception. The goal of this game is not money, it is not control. They already have all of that. This is a soul world war. And if Lucifer can keep you in the game, your soul is in his tally. Lucifer uses every trick in the book to steal and cheat his way to the top, to play God and to spite God. Things don't always go smoothly or play out perfectly. Lucifer is not God. He's not omnipresent, all-powerful, and he's not all-seeing, as the all-seeing eye wants to make us believe. That is a lie. But no one is exempt from this game unless you have made the decision to say, I want out, and I know the one who is the way, the truth, and the life, and he's the only one who can get me out of this game. True reality does not exist outside this game for anyone except those who have made that decision. Once you've been removed and saved from the game, called Mystery Babylon in the Bible, you're able to explain to everyone else who got you out and how, as described in John 17:15-16. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. It's time to separate Jesus Christ from the false light. Alright, let's go through the gameplay. We'll be moving around the entire board, and each space will offer us some information to put the entire game together. It's like a puzzle. Once you have all the pieces, you can see the big picture. The first concept is exoteric. Exoteric means something suitable to be imparted to the public. In a group setting, everyone has access to exoteric information, or, in an organization, everyone is on an exoteric basis. Next is esoteric. Esoteric is the antonym of exoteric. It means something like information suitable for only specific members of a group. This information is not known by the general public, or even the exoteric members within a group or organization.
To give an example, in a cult, all of the members are part of the cult and they get the cult's doctrinal teaching. They're all exoteric, but the leaders of the cult may recruit from inside by invitation only for those members to learn about the inner sanctum, or more occulted, or hidden information about the cult's true purpose. That's esoteric. One of these groups that act like the scapegoat for all the others is the fraternal order on the next concept square, the Freemasons. However, there are a multitude of other orders, sects, beliefs, and cults that make up what is called the Universal Brotherhood Network. The Masons generate books and TV shows dedicated to creating an air of mystery and suspicion around their organization, which keeps the public entertained but also incredibly misinformed. Many envision this order to be behind literally every evil thing done in history. This is an illusion generated by the mysticism and secrecy of the Brotherhood Network itself. There are thousands of groups and orders working together as part of this network to achieve worldwide changes. The Freemasons are just the flamboyant poster boys, and that's how they like it. If the public pins all the wrongs and unexplainable things on them, they will never look any further and discover the constellation of occultic orders actually running the show.
In practice, it's much less mysterious than they want us to believe. Changes in society, whether for good or bad, are caused by people doing things. The Brotherhood Network has simply been an effective way to get people to act and to keep much of what they do secret. How? By employing dialectics, something we'll be discussing shortly. Before we move on to the next concept, I want to make this clear. Freemasonry and all other orders, individuals, families, and societies belonging to the Brotherhood Network can be represented by the checkerboard floor. This symbol represents balance and duality to them. Many throw all that is Masonic onto the dark squares, as in seeing them as nothing but savage and doing evil just to be evil. But the checkerboard floor does not look like this. There is no balance. The white spaces are just as important and powerful as the dark ones. From here on out, most of what is being discussed deals with the esoteric reality of our world. It's the gears inside the machine that make it work. That's what we're looking at. That means whatever we see on the surface is usually not what's really going on. So think a little harder and dig a little deeper to see through the facade set up for us. Some of the people and institutions you have your faith in are not what they seem. However, not every pastor, scientist, teacher, or influential person or group are members of the Brotherhood Network. They've been taught by those who were. The system perpetuates itself. The next concept is the concept of history versus true history.
This is also narrative versus reality. What is generally regarded to be true, as in popular, is not necessarily true. Just because a lot of people believe something does not make it fact. Much of what makes up what people believe to be reality is just engineered propaganda with little to no evidence or facts behind it. It's just socially accepted. It also makes the world seem smaller than it is. This goes for history books to today's news articles. For example, what the media tells you is what they were paid to say. Advertisers are just one group of many who have a lot of control over what the media says based on how much money they spend.
Exactly. Can you spot who's been sponsoring the media lately?
Good Morning America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch sponsored by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
This weather report brought
brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press Data Download, brought to you by Pfizer.
This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
He who pays the piper calls the tune. Going along with this, the next concept is that of shared reality. More specifically, the concept of multiple versions of shared reality. Shared reality means the accepted version of reality, or truth, that the majority follow. The singular shared reality has been splitting for a number of years, but 2020 fractured it completely. Have you noticed there seem to be two different versions of reality for those still playing the game?
There are those who follow the conventional narrative and choose not to expand their thought beyond the walls of what they call truth. Then there are those who believe the counter-narrative, or are considered more unconventional and live in that version of reality. These two different versions of reality are no longer interacting with each other. It's a you're either with us or against us mentality. They have been separated into us versus them. Anyone falling into either of these sides is in freeze mode. Each side is waiting for healing, for progress, for movement, for the other side to be defeated so they can continue on their merry way. Like a war, each side gets propaganda that their side is winning when they're really just stuck in a tug-of-war. Now, don't think these are the only options. If you want to win this game, you have to be in the third version of reality, which is recognizing that both of these realities are still part of the game.
How do these reality versions operate? What is the engine behind the machine, you ask? Well, we've arrived at Ordo ab Chao, the dialectic space. If you don't control the problem, you can't control the solution. The problem is never the solution. How is this accomplished? With something called Hegelian dialectics. While these are best seen in practice, the model is thesis, problem, antithesis, reaction, synthesis, solution. You can also think of thesis as action. Action provokes reaction, which leads to the desired solution. Exploring Hegel's philosophy of totality makes this concept easier to understand. For Hegel, only the whole is true. Every stage or phase or moment is partial and therefore partially untrue. Hegel's grand idea is totality, which preserves within it each of the ideas or stages that it has overcome or subsumed, which means to include or absorb it into something else. Overcoming or subsuming is a developmental process made up of moments, as in stages or phases. The totality is the product of that process, which preserves all of its moments as elements in a structure rather than as stages or phases. Think of these structural elements as the interrelated ones of a whole architecture.
Like a snowball collecting snow as it goes, dialectics are how the powers that be accomplish, well, everything.
Going along with the dialectic concept is the idea of the force. This concept was discussed in depth in part 3 of my Mind Game series. Please check out my Mind Game series on my other accounts such as Odysee. Links below.
In short, within Luciferianism, or those who consider themselves enlightened, it is believed that there is a force, or an energy source, that can be used for evil or good, depending on how the practitioner chooses to use it.
We can figure out from this that a miraculous can either make a superhero or a supervillain. It's all riding on who wears it, which is why these jewels can't fall into just anybody's hands.
This can be understood the same way the descriptors Satan and Lucifer represent two different sides of the same coin. Satan means adversary, while Lucifer means bringer of light, but both are the ways the Bible describes the fallen angel that deceived Eve in the Garden of Eden.
As I described in part 3 of the Mind Game series, the force can be thought of like a battery. There is a negative pole and a positive pole. One does not exist without the other, but they both belong to the same battery. The battery does not work without both poles, the dark side, the light side, both belonging to Lucifer. God is not on this axis. The two sides here, dark and light, work in a good cop, bad cop dynamic. The light side can step in to present the solution to the problem created by the dark. Think of these sides as the right and left hand of Lucifer himself. They are used in different ways to accomplish his various goals. In other words, divide and conquer. The super elite divide us, as well as their own soldiers, to conquer whatever agenda they wish to achieve. Matthew 12:26 says, "And if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? That's why this division of light versus dark isn't a division at all. It's a Hegelian dialectic of using a problem, divide, to provoke a reaction, to reach a solution, conquer. This motto is actually an old alchemical model called solve et coagula, meaning dissolve and conjoin. This highly esoteric phrase is also depicted in the symbolism of the Baphomet, drawn in 1856 by the French occultist Eliphas Lévy. Not only does it depict the merging of the masculine and feminine aspects, its arms read solve and coagula, dissolve and conjoin. In simple terms, break down, as in separate, and build up, or join together. This symbolism is seen in the statue of George Washington called the Enthroned Washington Statue. Now make no mistake, he is depicted in this same pose in the apotheosis of George Washington in the dome of the Capitol building. Apotheosis is another word for deification. Back to the Force. You already know plenty of examples of this. In entertainment, magic is used the same way. There is always a good kind of magic fighting against the bad magic. Neither of these sides represent God. It's all just witchcraft.
The black on the proverbial occult chessboard represents Saturn, the dark sun, also called the black sun or Satan. The white represents the sun, the light, illumination, gold, or Lucifer. To summarize, the Force is a power believed in by esoteric societies that can be wielded benevolently or maliciously. Within the mystery traditions or occultism, there are two sides, the metaphorical light and the dark. God has one path, straight and narrow. In 1 John 1:5, it says that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. God does not need darkness to have light. John 8:12 says, "Again Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Jesus is the light of life. What was the first thing Lucifer proved? His light brought death to Adam and Eve. His light is the light of death. That false light will never lead to God or to truth. God is the only source of wisdom. The difference between the light of God and this false light of Lucifer should be clear by now.
Occultist Pythagoras believed in the idea of two antagonistic principles. He attributed the color white to the good principle and black to the evil one. The shape of the Y illustrates the Force, two branches from the same source. Who is executing these dialectics? Nothing happens on its own. To be put into effect, you need players. So who are the players in this game? Well, that leads to the next concept. Polarity. The players are the people on either side of the pole. Villain and hero, two sides in a war, enemies and allies, dark and light, or more accurately, from dark to light, from problem to solution. Remember, the problem is never the solution. The journey is never the destination. The powers that be who run this world follow a set of beliefs, and they do not care whether you believe in their philosophies or not. Understanding the perspective of occultism is important to understand the lens with which the, quote, super elite see the world. Occultism and things like hermetics are considered spiritual sciences by them, with the goal of guiding the learner to reach a state of acknowledging both the emotional aspect and reasonable aspect of oneself. If you think occultism is just about myth or ritual, you do not understand the belief of occultism and the way the elite have kept their religion of the mysteries and its esoteric teachings alive for centuries. It's just information passed down through a generational esoteric chain.
The Kybalion speaks of the principle of polarity, which explains that there are two poles in everything and that opposites are really only two extremes of the same thing, the difference being only in degree. An obvious example is hot and cold, high and low, death and life. Like and unlike are the same as in two sides of the same coin. Hermeticism says that energetic evolution, or transmuting the body into a light body, is the true meaning, purpose, and goal of life. Most magical systems share this fundamental belief of connecting to divinity by integrating the higher self and the lower self. At the end of the day, most magical systems reach the same destination despite there being many roads leading to it. A majority of Hermetic teachings overlap with Eastern and Taoist concepts. To integrate the, quote, higher self, which corresponds to the light extreme of the axis, to the lower self, which corresponds to the dark extreme of the axis, is the goal. The way to achieve supposed godhood, merging the dark with the light, the red with the blue, the bad with the good, the Kabbalistic tree of death with the tree of life.
Further still, this concept of polarity is on display in the Kabbalistic philosophy. Kabbalah is incompatible with biblical Christianity, and God has no part of that Luciferian ideology. The tree of life in Kabbalah is the, quote, light side. Since the hidden or occulted shadow of the tree called the Qlipoth deals in the darkness, or the dark side of the Force. Now don't make the mistake of believing that because the Qlipoth deals in evil, that the Kabbalistic tree of life deals in holiness. They are both Luciferian. They represent the Force, the two poles of light and dark. Kabbalistic path workings represent this idea. The tree of knowledge of good, the path of mercy, and evil, severity. But in the end, the paths merge. So what is a path?
In the Kabbalistic belief, a path is a step required to go from one sephirah to another, from one state to another. This involves a great deal of work on the practitioner's part. It can get extremely complicated.
You can think about it like a tunnel, with its entrance having a lot to do with one sephirah, and its exit having a lot to do with the other sephirah, and something happens in the middle to make the change possible. If you're thinking about it in terms of psychology, it's the change in states of mind that's required for going from one to the other states of mind.
2 Corinthians 11:3 tells us of the simplicity of the salvation and wisdom offered by Jesus, as opposed to the works-based, complicated, illusory nature of the mysteries. That's why it's so important to get out of this world, or this mind game, this world of black and white, bad versus evil, right and left. The programming wants you to see it in a dualistic way, this or that, but it's just the illusion of choice.
The real way out is through Jesus Christ, who says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free," in John 8:32.
There is an axis within each organization or family bloodline that makes up the Brotherhood network. For example, while both were Freemasons, Albert Pike was on the dark side, while Manly P. Hall in his literature showed he was on the light side. The highest level esoteric Masons are unified in their end goal, but there must be two sides to achieve it.
It is worth noting that some orders or individuals seem to flip-flopped to act in ways that progress the dark's agenda at times, and then others that progress the light's agenda. But it's all to achieve the overall goal. Their position can be changed based on the goal they need to complete. At the lowest levels, I believe some on the dark side see the light side as a genuine threat. The light side may also truly believe they are God, soldiers of God, or even angels themselves, sent to rid the world of evil, because in their polarized reality, there is no God as we know him. There is only the Lucifer axis of false light and darkness. So the false light appears as a genuine threat to those on the dark side. How? Well, this concept was discussed in depth in my program series, but essentially it has to do with creating dissociative states that believe whatever agenda they were programmed to believe. Some subjects operate on the dark side, and some on the light, but each side needs its players. The key to understanding this game, though, is to ask yourself one question. Who is doing the programming? The highest esoteric levels make both sides of the plans. These plans, compartmentalized, are passed to the programmers. These few see the chessboard as a whole. They use people as the fragments that make up this piece. It's the same people who program both dark and light alters and triggers into subjects. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, please watch my program series. At the end of the day, it is a fallacy to believe the light side is new or the dark is the only side. You can't play chess with one color. Here is a good example of the current polar spectrum of reality. I found this online using this same bifurcation. Great Awakening, Great Reset.
This image suggests two paths and two paths only, one leading to the Great Reset, which is the Dark World Order or a dystopia, and the other to the Great Awakening, the Light World Order and a utopian outcome. The Great Reset, for example, is a dialectic in itself. The highest tier of the, quote, super elite know very well they will never implement this, but they need the fear generated by the threat of it to force the desired solution of the Great Awakening. Just as dark is the opposite of light, the Great Reset is the opposite of the Great Awakening.
This isn't a picture of opposing forces at all. It's actually a picture of dialectics, from problem to solution, from dark to light. The fear of the dark drives the desired reaction, which propels us to the planned solution all along, which is, and has always been, the Great Awakening. The occultists call this the New Atlantis or the Age of Aquarius. The Great Awakening world consists of all the Great Reset is not. Autonomy and freedom is returned to the people, as well as their money and hope for a future. It is the opposite of the Great Reset's dogma. The point of scaring you into projecting yourself into a false future and living that fear now is so that when that possibility is eliminated, you'll feel relieved and grateful to those who liberated you from that fate.
And look at this meme. Dear globalists, we the people have reviewed your proposal for the Great Reset, and we regret to inform you that we will have to decline at this time. Although we did find the free trial of the New World Order very interesting, we have decided instead to go with the Great Awakening. Yours sincerely, the human race.
That is, humans that still choose to play the game. If this meme were to represent all of the human race as it claims, then the entire human race has been played. Although we did find the free trial of the problem very interesting, this meme demonstrates our predictable reaction, and we have decided instead to go with the solution. Yours sincerely, some of the human race. Okay, we're going to address the final concept now before moving on to the next phase of the game. The reason for discussing all we just did is to get to this point. That is the idea of mental manipulation. This is also sometimes called magic. Magic works via a mix of psychology, quantum physics, and spiritual elements. The three cannot be separated. Magic comes from plain and simple human attention.
Why is this concept fundamental?
Because the powers that be utilize mental manipulation to achieve their desired reality. This directly affects you and I. They execute their plans physically, but also mentally. These plans affect the macro operating system of the world, not an individual's microscale.
They could care less about you and I personally. They use us as collectives to complete a goal. Mental manipulation is one of those ways. Why don't you explain that with some backstory?
Okay, well, we just discussed polarity, which is only one example of the 7 principles that are the foundation of what's called Hermeticism, which is a branch of spiritual philosophy dating back as early as the 1st century AD. They were outlined by Hermes Trismegistus, who is believed to have written 2 influential ancient teachings, the Emerald Tablet and the Corpus Hermeticum, both of which theorize the foundational laws of our reality in what's called the 7 Hermetic Principles. His work would go on to influence ancient Greek and Egyptian cultures, with both adopting him as a god of wisdom. In Greece, he was called Hermes, and in Egypt, they called him Thoth. He was known in his time as a, quote, great master of the universe, end quote, and is said to have lived for thousands of years. Some believe he was Saint Germain. He was worshipped as a god with his own pseudo-religion of Hermeticism. Over time, those principles were passed down esoterically from teacher to student, and eventually, sometime in the early 20th century, the teachings were compiled into a book called the Kybalion, written by the 3 initiates. This is important because the occultists in power utilize this system alongside other philosophical and spiritual systems to shape or attempt to shape reality. For example, the first principle, the principle of mentalism, states the universe is mental. And no, not like mad. The principle of mentalism states that the universe is akin to a mental projection and basically says thoughts shape reality. Now this gets into the realm of quantum mechanics, and I'm not going to explain this any further. It's not necessary. For the purpose of this video, it is critically important to understand that the tier of architects, the super elite, use magic in the form of mental manipulation to shape our reality. This is why magical systems, such as the Kabbalah, are such a big deal to various occultists. They believe change in the outer world is facilitated by changes in the mental state. Luciferians use magic, the power of the mind, along with demonic and elemental forces to effect change. That being said, the fundamental concept here is mental transmutation, which is the art of transforming or changing the condition, quality, or nature of the mind from one condition to another. There are 2 steps involved in mental transmutation. 1, awareness, and 2, inversion. In order to transmute negative mental states into positive states, one must first be aware that they are experiencing a negative state. In order for something to change, one must be aware of it first. The second step is to polarize that state to the opposite state.
So, if the negative state is we are losing our freedom, our future, autonomy, safety, and security, and we have become aware of this, the positive, or the inversion, would be we regain our freedom, in quotes, that was taken in the first place. It seems like the powers that be are forcing the masses to become aware of the negative state by way of living through it. The next step would be inversion.
Since it's simple to identify the negative, it is simple to now understand the positive, as in the inversion of the negative state. Again, the problem is never the solution, but it leads you to it. We call Hegel's dialectical principle of totality. Every stage, phase, or moment is partial and therefore partially untrue or unwhole. Our current reality is partially untrue. It's incomplete. So don't get caught up in the impermanence of what's happening at the moment. When things continue to change and shift more and more toward the light, don't let your guard down. It's not good. It's not getting better. It's the inversion. The inversion is from dark to light. Don't be blinded by that light. It's not the light of God. We've arrived at the next phase of the game. Now we'll be discussing the light. According to Freemasonry, light is the key which opens the door to our mysteries.
In occultism, the light is viewed as the invisible force that guides an initiate to knowledge and higher consciousness or enlightenment. This can be achieved in a variety of ways. Some paths are dark, some are light, but they all seek the same goal, even if the paths look vastly different. All religions or spiritual beliefs may differ in form and function, but they are all ultimately seeking the, quote, light. In other words, the many paths that follow the light lead to unity. However, there is one path that leads to God, and that is very clear in the Scriptures, and it is not by following the nebulous light. No, Matthew 7:13-14 states, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." When all different religious systems coexist in lodges and other orders who worship the, quote, light, you can be certain it is not God.
The light has been the substitution, the counterfeit God, for millennia. I covered this in part 1 of the Mind Game series, where we looked at the worship of the light in all its forms, from fire to the sun, throughout world history, and its religions. By Lucifer saying anyone can become God, by eating the fruit of the tree to gain enlightenment, it takes away the majesty and power God has, since, according to Lucifer, anyone can do it. The origin of Luciferianism, this veneration of light, and all the world's varied religions can be found through a mischaracterization by the mystery traditions of Genesis 1:1-3, which states, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." God spoke and light was created. Remember this. Light is a creation, not a creator. The Bible warns of this, the worship of the creation and not the creator, in Romans 1:25. The phrase, "let there be light," is the basis for all mystery religions and eventually all religions. This photo, titled Optics by A.D. Markin, shows the Eye of Horus of Lucifer, which they call Providence. Above is Hebrew writing which says, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light."
Light, a creation, became synonymous with truth and knowledge as opposed to its creator, God. Light became the thing humanity should seek, not God himself. The mysteries center around the veneration of this created light, this esoteric and ultimately false light. Because they are seeking enlightenment not from the true God of Scriptures, if they were, these occult groups would not be part of the mystery religion. Just from the very existence of the Brotherhood network, the light they seek is not God, no matter what exoteric propaganda they spin. This so-called light is not the same God as the Creator God. Their light is hidden, occulted. It is a works-based ideology, not a faith-based one.
In the entered apprentice initiation of Freemasonry, the initiate is lost in darkness and seeking the light. Blindfolded, the initiate is led through the process of being reborn into the light. In the Entered Apprentice Study Guide, or the very first initiation into the craft, the first question asked is, what do Freemasons seek? The answer is light. Light represents knowledge.
This is no different than the countless sun gods. They are just personifications of this light or the giving of knowledge or enlightenment. Freemason and worshipful master Albert Mackey wrote the book The Symbolism of Freemasonry in 1882, where he explains what light means to Freemasons. Light was, in accordance with this old religious sentiment, the great object of attainment in all the ancient religious mysteries. It was there, as it is now, in Masonry, made the symbol of truth and knowledge. This was always its ancient symbolism, and we must never lose sight of this emblematic meaning when we are considering the nature and signification of Masonic light. When the candidate makes a demand for light, it is not merely for that material light which is to remove a physical darkness. That is only the outward form, which conceals the inward symbolism. He craves an intellectual illumination which will dispel the darkness of mental and moral ignorance and bring to his view, as an eyewitness, the sublime truths of religion, philosophy, and science, which it is the great design of Freemasonry to teach. So, according to Mackey, light became the symbol of truth and knowledge.
Mackey also says, and pay attention here, darkness is the symbol of initiation. It is intended to remind the candidate of his ignorance, which Masonry is to enlighten, of his evil nature, which Masonry is to purify, of the world in whose obscurity he has been wandering, and from which Masonry is to rescue him. We as a collective whole, so humanity, are living in a real-life simulation of this initiation. The world is being initiated into the mysteries. It has been for some time, but this was the catalyst to plunge the world into darkness, which is the symbol of initiation. It is the burial, the death portion of the death and resurrection ritual. It is intended to remind the candidate of his ignorance. Consider the rate at which people are waking up, whether it's to the real truth or just to simply questioning their worldview. People who have never once questioned anything suddenly realize things are not as they seem. Of his evil nature, which Masonry is to purify. Masonry is synonymous with the, quote, light. And the darkness reminds the candidate of the world, in whose obscurity he's been wandering and from which Masonry is to rescue him. So from this darkness, we need a savior. And that savior, according to occultists, is Masonry, which is represented by the light. The light, or knowledge, as in enlightenment, is the savior.
This thought is preserved in the motto of the order, Lux e Tenebris, light out of darkness. The site, Freemasonry Matters, says that, without darkness, he could neither see nor appreciate the light. Manly P. Hall wrote in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, through the labyrinth of diversity, only the illumined mind can and must lead the soul into the perfect light of unity. This is a mural in the House of the Temple in D.C., which is a Scottish Rite Masonic temple. At the top it says, Fiat Lux, which means, let there be light. Notice the eye of Horus in the center. From this eye comes rays of light illuminating the mural of Solomon's temple. Underneath that is Ordo ab Chaos, order from chaos. And if you notice the border around it, swastikas. This symbol is used in the Order of New Templars, which was a German occult sect organized between 1894 and 1907. The Order of New Templars survived for a generation but went underground after the German invasion of Austria in 1938. Adolf was a member of this order.
Next is the Great White Brotherhood. Much of what makes up New Age literature and is espoused by New Age leaders was provided by what they call the Brotherhood of the Great White Lodge. So what is that? They are called various names, such as Ascended Masters and Spirit Guides. New Age channelers claim to be in contact with these entities, and that is how they receive their information. Helena Blavatsky, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, fraternal orders like the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians, among many others, all follow orders or directions from this group.
These Ascended Masters are also called the Hierarchy and the Brotherhood of Light by channeler J.J. Hertig, the Brotherhood by channeler Richard Kieniger, and the Divine Hierarchy of Great Beings of the Universal Brotherhood by channeler Earlene Cheney. They're also called fallen angels or demonic entities by anti-channeler and YouTuber, probably Alexandra. Ascended Masters are a concept found within occult circles like Theosophy and any New Age group, such as the Freemasons who created the organized New Age movement. This is how those groups explain the concept. Essentially, they are believed to be spiritually enlightened beings who, in their past, were once ordinary humans. Their followers believe that Ascended Masters are individuals who were formerly embodied on the earth and learned the lessons of life during their supposed incarnations or lifetimes. They, quote, gained mastery over the limitations of the material plane, much like what Masonry claims to teach, and fulfilled their, quote, dharma, or their divine plan. By doing all of this, they attained enlightenment and a sort of godhood.
So they are masters because they gained mastery over human limitations, as they are ascended masters. These now allegedly ascended masters guide humanity and communicate to their New Age channels, or humans who allow themselves to be in contact with them through various rituals. Looking at this from a biblical perspective, the idea of any human being becoming enlightened through knowledge to attain godhood is essentially the lie the serpent told in the Garden of Eden. No soul is sent back here time and time again, balancing their karmic load until they reach enlightenment. It is incompatible with the finished work of Jesus Christ, dying for our sins on the cross and offering salvation and eternal life. Jesus breaks that perceived cycle of fail and repeat to get to an eternal state of non-incarnating. He bridges that gap, breaks the Ouroboros, and creates the way to the truth and eternal life.
New Age religions or the mysteries, like Theosophy, do not deny the existence of Jesus at all. They simply claim he too was one such ascended master. But he is not the only way, he is not the only truth, he is just one of many. The powers that be have no plans to abolish churches, but to silently overthrow them. This was accomplished over a 100-year period beginning in the 1920s with the infiltration of Masons into churches and the esoteric roots of seminary schools.
This was all covered in my videos, The Antichrist Investigation and An Inconvenient History. New Age writer William Thompson states, quote, "The new spirituality does not reject the earlier patterns of the great universal religions. Priest and church will not disappear. They will not be forced out of existence in the New Age. They will be absorbed into the existence of the New Age." End quote. This was the topic of my original Mind Game series. Next is God Upside Down. An old Kabbalistic motto states that demon est deus inversus. The devil is God upside down, or the devil is God's complement. This belief is symbolized in the Kabbalistic tree of life, and its shadow, the tree of death. This makes the incorrect assumption that the Kabbalistic map titled the Tree of Life is of God. If we were to put these trees on a pole, with the Tree of Life being the light and the Tree of Death being dark, if you turn this horizontal axis vertical, then the devil is God upside down. I hope you see why God does not belong on this light to dark axis. The light that is being sought after is of Lucifer, and the Tree of Life is the light side, and the Tree of Death is the dark side. Many people believe that motto because they think in simple dualities. If dark, then light. But as this entire game has shown, that is not the case. The two, Lucifer and God, evil and holy, do not share an axis. The two have nothing in common. They are the absence of one another. Evil is the result of the absence of holiness. Where there is sin, there is evil, and God has no part of that. But this fact is contrary to the very core of Theosophy and what the mysteries teach. It destroys their argument. Theosophy's extraordinary assumption is encapsulated in Blavatsky's quote, "The devil is God upside down." They have to place God on the good-bad axis with Lucifer for their beliefs to hold up. To believe God is the light end of the Lucifer spectrum is to, 1, ignore all of the warnings we receive about Lucifer coming as a deceiver, a trickster, and masquerading as an angel of light, or truth, and to 2, to agree with the underpinning ideology of the mysteries, wherein Lucifer is God's complement.
The core of Theosophy and of the mysteries is the idea of the force, energy that is used for good or bad, a light with a shadow. This is all outlined in the Secret Doctrine volumes by Helena Blavatsky. One of her beliefs is as follows. Theosophy accepts all faiths and philosophies and refuses to accept only gods of the so-called monotheistic religions, gods created by man in his own image and likeness, a blasphemous and sorry caricature of the ever unknowable. Or the Kabbalistic Ein Sof, or limitless light, the no thing. To them, God is the whole, the synthesis of the universe, polytheistic in nature, and encapsulated in this conglomeration that God is both dark and light, good and bad.
Does that sound more like the Force than God? That's because it is. To Blavatsky, the great serpent of the Garden of Eden and the Lord God are identical. This philosophy puts God at the light end of the spectrum with the great serpent Lucifer at the bad end. Or the devil is God upside down. You should now see how incorrect these mystery traditions are with the truth. This is a man-made characterization of God and not what the Bible explains at all. Evil is the opposite of holiness, and evil is not a part of God. Evil was the result of the fall. It is the separation from God that produces evil, not God himself. God is the remedy to evil. God is on a spectrum, but it is not bad to good or dark to light. His poles are justice and mercy. As you can see, a few examples are found here. Psalm 89:14, Ephesians 2:4-5, Luke 6:36, and Lamentations 3:22-23. The next space is the Kabbalistic Connection. So when these mystics seek the light or path work on their Kabbalistic trees, where does this light lead? Follow the trail and you'll always discover Lucifer. The Sephirah on the tree supposedly represent the emanations of deity, or the Ein Sof, and meant to represent the spiritual bond between God and man. Masonry is a search after light. That search leads us directly back, as you see, to Kabbalah, said Albert Pike, 33rd degree Freemason and Sovereign Grand Master of the Scottish Rite in the 1800s. Kabbalah is indeed of the essence of Freemasonry, says Helena Blavatsky. These mystics agree the deity of Kabbalah is the god over their anti-Christ organizations, thus not the God of the Bible at all, but instead his adversary. So the Kabbalah, in one form or another, is what links all world religions together, and the roots of Kabbalah are Luciferian.
This trend is not new. Its popularity is not new either. Mysticism goes through periods of resurgence all throughout history, but the underpinning Luciferianism practiced by the super elite, the top tier, never wavers. One small geographic example of its popularity and resurgence can be found in the book Jacob's Ladder, a Kabbalistic Allegory in Russian Literature by Marina Aptekman. It explains on page 153, an occult journal, Rebus, reported in 1906 that all of Petersburg was caught up in a powerful mystical movement and that a veritable maelstrom of little religions, cults, and sects was arising there. This movement embraces both the upper and lower levels of society. At the upper levels, we find the Theosophic Buddhist trend. Elsewhere, we see the crescendo of interest in Freemasonry, as well as a resurgence of long silent religious movements from the last century. Petersburg, Moscow, and the provinces were all caught up in this trend. They buzzed with new secret societies, demonstrations of hypnotism, and gypsy fortune-telling. Every educated reader had at least a nodding acquaintance with Theosophy and Spiritualism, Rosicrucianism, Martinism, and Tarot. People were acquainted with these ideas, even if their knowledge was based only on cafe gossip and sensational newspaper articles in popular magazines.
Notice the class distinction. It is the elite that practice the theosophical flavor of the mysteries, as opposed to its organized branches like Masonry and Rosicrucianism, practiced by the lower levels of society. The reason they use the term Theosophic Buddhist trend is because of the parallels with very little differences between Kabbalah and Buddhist esoteric beliefs. An example is that one of the goals of the Kabbalistic system is to unite the male and female energies.
The goal of the whole system is to unite the male and the female. Male and female appear in various places on this chart, but primarily the middle Sphira Tiferet is seen as masculine, and the last of the 10 Sphirot, Malchut, I'll refer to her as Shekhinah, her other name. Shekhinah means presence, Malchut means kingdom. So Malchut or Shekhinah is the feminine, Tiferet is the masculine. The goal of the system is to unite the masculine and the feminine.
In 2009, Saint Germain was channeled by New Ager Molly Rowland, saying the same thing.
I am stepping into the role of world teacher for the Aquarian Age. The Aquarian Age, the age of divine androgyny. God, Goddess, all that is. The divine masculine and divine feminine blending and aligning with the God force.
In Buddhism, the goal of Tantra is to merge Shiva, the masculine energy, and Shakti, the feminine energy. The same goal as the Kabbalah. Again, nothing is disconnected. Lucifer will accept worship in any way, shape, or form he can get it. Which brings us to the next concept, Christ consciousness. John 14:6 says, Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. There is no second coming according to the mysteries like Theosophists or occultist societies. The return of Christ is nothing more than a return of Christ consciousness, which is the return of man's divinity to the human race through the knowledge of ascended masters.
The Christ of the New Age, or oneself being Christ, is encapsulated in the philosophy of Christ consciousness, which is achieving the highest state of intellectual development and emotional maturity or enlightenment. The idea of Christ consciousness has its roots in Theosophy. Achieving Christ consciousness is essentially the same thing as enlightenment.
Theosophists were not just historic characters most of us don't know much about, like Manly P. Hall and Hitler. Theosophists you all know were Edison and Tesla. Even Elvis was a theosophist. Christ consciousness did not originate in the organized New Age. Most faiths have similar concepts under different names. For example, in the Krishna consciousness movement, Krishna devotees gained Krishna consciousness, called God consciousness, by performing ritualized chants.
It's important to look deeper into these concepts and not just buy whatever they sell at face value. There are links and threads through all religions or beliefs that lead back to light worship, false light worship. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, Paul is talking to the church of Thessalonica and calls those who follow Jesus the children of light. Ye are all the children of light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep, as do others, but let us watch and be sober. Those who are called children of light are not part of the darkness. As you'll remember, there is no darkness in God, so this is not a statement of polarity. Those he calls children of light are those of the light of Jesus alone. Anyone practicing a false light philosophy falls into the darkness category. He goes on to say, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, abstain from all appearance of evil. He makes a point to tell his audience to test everything and throw out what is untrue. Not everything that appears good on the surface is, and that's why the true children of the light he refers to are able to decipher between not only overtly evil and deceptive ideologies, but also trickery that has an appearance of being good but is not.
He makes it very clear in chapter 5 that the children of light are the ones who follow Jesus. He is the only light. Lucifer's light is all smoke and mirrors. It's a false light. It's a trick. The Center for Christ Consciousness's website blasphemously claims that, quote, Jesus achieved this higher state of being in his human life and was given this term Christ before his name as the recognition of his achievement of this spiritual status. This path is open to anyone, regardless of their religious traditions, if and when he or she is able to become a living vessel of love and truth on the planet and actively strives to attain it. End quote. Essentially, Christ consciousness is how to become an ascended master, or how ye too can be as gods.
Christ consciousness is also spoken of in Genesis 3:5 by the serpent in the Garden of Eden, when he said, Then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods. It is important to make this connection. We know that Lucifer was in the garden and uttered this first lie, promising Eve she would be like God through enlightenment.
Now we see that this lie has stayed the same for centuries, and has been peddled throughout time by the same character, regardless of the names and the organizations and people doing his work. To work towards achieving Christ consciousness is to work towards the lie that Lucifer told before the fall.
This idea is not relegated to the many spiritual practices out there. No, be very careful. This Christ consciousness ideology is being placed before us as the Savior, and many are completely unaware. Christ consciousness states that, quote, if, as the collective of humanity, we will not strive to nurture the beautiful qualities encapsulated within the Christ consciousness, all that is negative in our reality will never cease, according to ThriveGlobal.com. Again, it's up to humanity. As well as the simple statement, to be awakened, to be conscious, means to align our consciousness with the Christ consciousness.
Pairing these two definitions, becoming aware of the negative state and choosing to live the inversion, or the opposite of it, allows one to be awakened. Mental transmutation takes one from the darkness of ignorance to the enlightenment of the light. This great awakening utilizes the concept of Christ consciousness and rejects the need for Jesus, because humanity can save itself, essentially.
According to OperationMeditation.com, anybody can become Christ conscious if they are open to the concept and seek to obtain this awareness and consciousness. The aim is for people to become more loving, compassionate, tolerant, patient, forgiving, understanding, and content by following a new way of conscious thinking. The means by which one achieves this is not important. The ultimate goal of the powers that be has always been to return to the, quote, golden age. One example is that of the hidden information contained within the Cave of Symbols of St. Germain that has been preserved since the supposed fall of Atlantis. Quote, these discoveries will be brought forth for mankind's use in the Golden Age, just as soon as man has learned to harness greed, selfishness, and the desire to control others through war and dishonest financial policies.
So as soon as Christ consciousness is achieved, whether on a macro or micro level, doesn't matter, this quote suggests macro, since people like you or I have no ability to control others through war or financial tyranny. When the system fails you, you make a new one. Did you make the old one? Then you don't have the power to make the new one either. The game is still rigged. Moving on to the Saint Germain connection. The Count of Saint Germain was both a physical human count alive in the 1700s, but is also the name of one of the 12 great white Brotherhood entities, the ones called Ascended Masters. His followers believed his life as the Count in the 1700s is when he gained his mastery and became, quote, ascended.
In the early 1900s, the basis of what became known as the I Am movement was given to the founder, Guy Ballard, by channeling the Ascended Master Saint Germain. Theosophists believe that, as the world's hidden leaders, members of this mystical brotherhood guide the destiny of the world. If you're taking notes, go ahead and underline that sentence. Blavatsky and the others believe that, as the world's hidden leaders, members of this mystical brotherhood guided the destiny of the world, and it was Saint Germain who gave the philosophy of the I Am movement to its founder.
Just appreciate the blasphemy of even calling it the I Am movement. They will do anything to try and be God.
The Theosophists considered Saint Germain to be one of the hidden immortals who manipulate history. Saint Germain is known as the seventh ray, the angel over the time of the seventh trumpet of Revelation, which is the last trumpet, and this character is also the teacher of the Aquarian age, as opposed to the Sananda Maitreya, who was the teacher of the Piscean age, or the Jesus figure to them. And according to their lore, Saint Germain is his brother. Sanctus Germanus means holy brother, so not only does their lore state he's the Jesus character's brother, he is also holy. Germain had a hand in founding the Masons, the Rosicrucians, and the Knights Templar fraternal orders.
So Saint Germain taught Ballard about the great creative word, or I Am. The I Am presence is said to be in each person and represents a point of contact with divine reality. This is another rebranding of Christ consciousness.
The I Am movement was also interested in preserving the idea of America, which they called a revolutionary experiment in freedom, also known as the Great Masonic Experiment.
In 1958, Saint Germain used another messenger, Mark Prophet, who formed the Summit Lighthouse movement. Together with his wife, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, they formed the Church Universal and Triumphant, dedicated to Saint Germain, Theosophy, and the I Am presence. Elizabeth Clare Prophet describes Saint Germain as the violet flame, the Shohan of the seventh ray, and the sponsor of the United States.
Samuel, Columbus, Shakespeare, Bacon. Enter Saint Germain, sponsor of the United States of America. He is the seventh angel prophesied in Revelation, who comes to finish the mysteries of God.
The Masonic book Mystic Americanism falsely claims that the theme of the entire Bible centers around the hope of a glorious country far off, in an age that was to come. It essentially claims the woman in Revelation 12 who fled into the wilderness is to return, and in a glorious nation defeat the dragon by reopening the ancient teachings of the Holy Grail, which they call the illumination of the soul. This is the exact same story as the one from the Cave of Symbols.
Here we see the axis of dark versus light. The darkness, the dragon, is defeated by the resurrection of enlightenment, the illumination of the soul. Where is Jesus? Yet again, it is Christ consciousness. It is the enlightenment via the light we've been discussing. It's the imposter or the counterfeit savior. Another point to mention in this Masonic book is the importance placed on America to bring the mysteries to life and illuminate the world, or bring light to darkness. Notice the polar imagery on this cover page. The Masonic and Kabbalistic pillars Yashin and Boaz, the pillars of mercy and severity, man and woman, both humans differing in degree, day, night, Osiris, masculine, and Isis, feminine.
In the 1770s, his followers say that Saint Germain worked behind the scenes with George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin preparing the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. He's a character very involved with the origins of America. According to MasonicSites.org, there's no question that Masonry contributed something to the structure and machinery of the American government. The Constitution of the United States, in a very real sense, is a Masonic document. In its final form, the Constitution represented the collective thoughts of Ben Franklin, Edmund Randolph, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and George Washington. Of these, all but Jefferson were not only active Masons, but men who took their Freemasonry extremely serious. The new republic, when it emerged with the Constitution, conformed to that ideal image, and that image reflected the ideals of Freemasonry, that the United States of America was and is the great Masonic experiment. Principles found in Plato's Republic and the book New Atlantis by Francis Bacon outline the foundation of the government of the United States. The founding principles of those works were not Christian, as many falsely believe, but part of the mystery religion. According to ScottishRite.org, the striking similarities between the Masonic constitutions and the Articles of Confederation, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights display a revealing connection that has been hardly recognized or explicitly advertised. This is one of Freemasonry's public secrets that has agitated fundamentalists and conspiracists alike. The U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights are Masonic in origin and, by extension, not Christian.
Yes, I talked about this in the Antichrist investigation and in Inconvenient History. Back to Saint Germain.
Freemason Charles Ledbetter gives us their perspective on Saint Germain in his book, The Hidden Life of Freemasonry. Quote, "This business was always in the hands of the Chohan of the Seventh Ray, for that is the ray most especially connected with ceremonial of all kinds, and its head was always the supreme hierophant of the mysteries of ancient Egypt. The present holder of that office is the Master of the Wisdom, of whom we often speak as the Count of Saint Germain, because he appeared under that title in the 18th century. He is also sometimes called Prince Rakosi, as he is the last survivor of that royal house. Exactly when he was appointed to the headship of the ceremonial ray I do not know, but he took a keen interest in Freemasonry as early as the 3rd century A.D. Ledbetter goes on to explain some of the many characters Saint Germain has influenced throughout history, such as Enki, Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, King Solomon, Plato, Merlin the Magician, Christopher Columbus, and Francis Bacon or William Shakespeare, to name a few. And then he says, in co-masonry we refer to him as the head of all true Freemasons throughout the world, abbreviated as the HOATF. And in some of our lodges his portrait is placed in the east, above the chair of the RWM, Right Worshipful Master, and just beneath the star of initiation. Others placed in the north, above an empty chair. Upon his recognition and ascent as head of the seventh ray, the validity of all rights and degrees depends.
The most revered placement in the lodge is reserved for Saint Germain. Not only that, he must be recognized as the Ascended Master, the head of the seventh ray, to validate their rights and degrees. Notice that Ledbetter capitalizes him and his. This small detail is called reverential capitalization, which is the practice of capitalizing religious words, particularly pronouns, that refer to a deity or divine being. Ledbetter insinuates that Saint Germain is the god of Freemasonry and, by extension, Theosophy. So the light they are working toward, that Kabbalistic end goal, is not God, but yet another facade of Lucifer. The New Age, being the daughter of Freemasonry, also claims Saint Germain is the Shohan of the seventh ray. Saint Germain, the Shohan of the seventh ray, holds a very important position in hierarchy in this age. Not only is he the Shohan of the seventh ray of freedom, mercy, transmutation, and ritual, but he is also the hierarch of the Aquarian age.
According to Mysteries of Templar Treasure in the Holy Grail, a letter written in the late 1700s by occultist and alchemist Count Cagliostro claims that Saint Germain said himself he was many centuries old and had been at King Solomon's court when the Queen of Sheba paid her famous state visit there. Interestingly, an effort was made in the late 1700s to eliminate Saint Germain's name from modern Masonic literature when the Freemasons were taken over by darker factions. Remember, it's a game of balance, and as George Washington wrote in one of his letters, he was aware of this dark faction infiltrating society, and it was the dark's time to rise. In order to accomplish the goals required, the dark were the ones used to complete the tasks. You can't go from dark to light without the dark. Another reason for concealing the light side philosophies is because they remain esoteric when the ideas have spread throughout society and have become watered down. The withholding of information keeps it in the hands of the few and allows the dialectics to continue. Saint Germain, through various channeled messages, spoke of the Aquarian Age and that it will be governed by the Ascended Masters and not by the bankers and the Dark Brotherhood. Take a moment to digest the amount of information here. Saint Germain was one of the first to speak of an age governed by these light entities as opposed to the banks and negative totalitarian rule. The following is a quote from the New Age, allegedly attributed to Elizabeth Clare Prophet regarding Saint Germain. The quote says, "At the helm of this momentous purging of Earth's dark forces is the great and holy Master Sanctus Germanus, again appearing at this particular flashpoint, as he did in past history, to guide and protect us at the threshold of the New Age."
Is Saint Germain's modus operandi present in the world once more? The answer might be yes. This movement is very much alive. The main goal of the Universal Brotherhood through things like Masonry, Theosophy, and all other occult societies is to spread the, quote, light. Nothing has initiated the masses into mystic thought faster or made the world more aware of its negative state and has been more widespread than the Great Awakening that began in 2017 with the government operation of something called Q. This section is for those familiar with the concepts of this operation, not those who got stuck at any of the hit pieces and false information about it. It's for those who continuously research the movement because it is a part of this massive game. This is an important piece of reality many are dismissing or idolizing. Both are dangerous.
An anon shows us an example of this polarized thinking. This is exactly where we're at, Patriots. Most going on seems lost and hopeless at times. Remember where we were in 2015. Some of the exact same rhetoric was being used then. There's no point in voting because history has it rigged. The deep state is too strong. Then together we rose up and created the greatest energy shift in the history of the world. We overcame the fraud, we overcame the MSM, we overcame the dark.
The greatest energy shift. This anon is describing a pole shift.
What do we know? A pole has two sides like a battery. You don't fight a war with one side. There's always a narrative and a counter-narrative. The Q movement represents the counter-narrative to the mainstream. If you think that the information posted by Q is new or originated with this movement, you are uninformed. Primary literature of the occultists shows that this is one of the oldest ideologies around, the return of the light. There are many ways this is being accomplished. The Q operation is just one of them.
This will bridge the gap from concept to concrete reality. So now that we've gone through all the parts that make up this game, the next piece is how does it apply to our lives? If you want to know the dark side of the war's exoteric narrative, you can watch the news or read their columns. But you're only getting one side of the propaganda. This is daft because if you have not applied everything we've already gone through on this board, you're missing the overall goal and maybe participating in the game without knowing it. You're in danger of falling for the solution to the problem. Let's look at how the other side, the light side's propaganda, is shaping reality. Remember the two work together at the highest levels to bring about the desired goal and changes. Some of these even take centuries to achieve, while some are achieved in just a few years. Regardless of your opinions on the man the world is polarized into either a villain or a hero, Trump's sole mission is indeed the same as the one attributed to Saint Germain: to take the power from the dark and disseminate the, quote, light to humanity. In other words, bring about a pole shift from dark to light.
Remember in May of 2019, Trump tweeted, "This is a bright new age, the age of enlightenment."
And Q post number 144 even references this new age of enlightenment. This renaissance of enlightenment from the dark age we've been in. I've already explained what Q is and where it came from and how it's linked itself to Trump and his players in my video, The Cult of Keck. Donald Trump is only the face of this multi-generational light operation. He takes orders from the highest levels, just like all the others do, as we discussed in Part 7 of Programmed, and plays his role just like those on the dark squares of the chessboard do. He generally speaks to the, quote, normies, or exoterically, while he leaves the esoteric information for the anons paying attention to the Q portion of the operation. He is the one in the public eye, and he says things to troll with the MSM, not necessarily to tell the viewers the truth. The implications of him doing so would be pretty drastic, and plausible deniability is a powerful tool he uses often. He does not have as much power as his devotees believe, but he has much more power than those who oppose him. He is and was performing alchemy in that he is turning lead, the dark, into gold, the light, the goal of the death to life ritual. Like it or not, Trump made the world aware of its negative state. He caused a great awakening.
Recall how Freemasons believe change is affected by people doing things. The strings that control the system, so to speak, were revealed once Q began giving the anons, social media users who follow Q, the initiative to dig for information. The information was largely available to anyone willing to put their time and their life on the line to look for it, but Q essentially used the old phrase, safety in numbers, to bring to light much that had been hidden and teach people to look for it, to become aware of reality.
There was that ant that stood up to me.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we can forget about him.
Yeah, it was just one ant. One ant.
Yeah, you're right. It's just one ant.
Yeah, boss. They're puny.
Puny? Say, let's pretend this grain is a puny little ant. Did that hurt?
No.
How about this?
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line.
Q gathered the ants together. This is a necessary step before inversion. It doesn't matter what your characterization is of this operation. The effect has been to raise awareness.
No longer is a single person or group attempting to expose monsters such as Big Pharma, Big Tech, or Big Agra. Now, there are thriving communities who share the same distrust and skepticism worldwide of what they had been conditioned to trust. This has grown so far out of control that Big Tech has gone on a campaign of extreme censorship to stop this. It has broken the landscape of the internet with much of what you and I see now generated by artificial intelligence, bots, and paid trolls.
Another example is that the propaganda on TV today was not how television started. The government had put rules in place to prevent this very problem. To do that, they decided that all 3 TV stations could air political programming provided they gave equal time to countering points of view. It was called the Fairness Doctrine and lasted from 1949 to 1987. Ronald Reagan canceled it. We're living through a problem outlined in the paradox of tolerance. The paradox of tolerance states that if a society is tolerant without limit, its ability to be tolerant is eventually seized or destroyed by the intolerant. Karl Popper described it as the seemingly paradoxical idea that in order to maintain a tolerant society, the society must retain the right to be intolerant of intolerance. Based on their actions and agendas, all that Q and Trump represent fall onto the light squares, while all those they purport to rally against fall into the dark squares. Counter-narrative versus narrative. Red pill versus blue pill. Be aware of when people dismiss all Trump and the gang are saying or doing by saying, oh, he's exactly the same as the others, or something like that, which invalidates everything about them by making you think that they're aligned with the dark, and the dark operations and their way of thinking. But what they don't realize is the two-sided nature of the Brotherhood network. There is dark, which everyone is aware of, and there is the light, the side that everyone ignores. They're not the dark side. They are on the light side. Both of them are not of God. But remember, at the very top, they are all in agreement with the plan. It just depends on which branch needs to carry out the parts of a dialectic at any given time. Just don't forget about the white squares. Back in 2017, Q started posting about wizards and warlocks. The first post using those terms was from November of 2017 and discussed the importance of military intelligence. This post explained that the alleged chance encounter by BC and then Attorney General LL on a tarmac in Arizona was planned and that the NSA knew about it. Take a moment to read the highlighted section here. The previous post continues with, quote, what was negotiated on the tarmac between BC and Lynch? Remember, it was expected HRC was going to win during this time period. What if the wizards and warlocks tipped off a local reporter as to the supposed unscheduled stop? What if the NSA, under the personal direction of Admiral Rogers, had this meeting miscategorized and logged under a false identity to prevent bad actors from locating while also verifying to said players all was clear? No logs. What really happened when the wizards and warlocks revealed what they had? Was C forced into the spotlight shortly thereafter, not by choice? Right before the no doubt, which would cast suspicion? C was indeed forced to discuss HRC's emails and evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, which HRC used to blame him for her loss. Q goes on to say, quote, if we failed, and HRC assumed control, We as patriots were prepared to do the unthinkable. This was leaked internally and kept the delegate recount scam and BO from declaring fraud. Q explains that they were ready to do something drastic to take down the dark side. They leaked what they were going to do and effectively kept these two from asking for this, or even declaring there was this in the 2016 this. Then Q says, there is simply no other way than to use the military. It's that corrupt and dirty. Now, that doesn't mean the military isn't dirty. It's just that they have their own soldiers in there they can control to reach their goal. What this means is that the military has information on the dark side and is using it as blackmail to make them do what the light side wants them to do. The light is forcing the solution to the dark side problem, because the light side are and have been in control for at least the last 6 years. Continuing with this line of thinking, in 2018, an anon asked, "Please tell us who the wizards and warlocks are," and they responded, "Guardians of Intelligence," meaning military intelligence. 2 years later, Space Force members were officially called Guardians. Now, Space Force is a cyberspace intelligence operation that was organized under the Department of the Air Force. Trump himself on October 21st of 2021 stated Space Force would be very important soon. Why is this important? What happened in 2020 was well accounted for and expected by the light side. The operation is still far from over. I just wanted to highlight the fact that these supposed guardians, who may very well turn out to be the saviors of mankind, are called wizards and warlocks. You know, warlocks for Jesus. Q promotes the idea that we're here to save or fix humanity. Justice belongs to the military, and because people have been conditioned to think the opposite of bad is good, they believe that since the dark side is bad, then Q and Trump must be good. But they're still playing the game. Q represents a false light, like the light of an anglerfish luring in unsuspecting prey. The adversary masquerades as an angel of light. Many Q posts tell the reader to, quote, follow the light. The very storm the Q movement wishes to achieve renders Jesus a useless character, or at best, a supporting character, because humanity can essentially save itself. Humanity is now being initiated on a massive scale into the light, the same way an adept is initiated into a mystery school. To summarize this section, no one readily believes a lie. Instead, they believe what, to them, looks like the truth. To gain the advantages of the dialectic method, the Luciferian powers must be behind both extremes, light and dark, liberal and conservative, and so on. But this only works if the people being manipulated and deceived do not realize the same people are behind both sides. It's not one-sided, just the dark. It's the dark, the light, the sum of its parts. The sides are just how the agendas get reached. Both are necessary to complete the goals. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Got it? Good. The folly with many who believe it's us versus them is that it's you and I versus the super elite. That places you and I into the light side of the pole. The entire purpose of this video is to implore you to see this error and stop participating in this game. This is not your world if you are saved by Jesus, and this is not your war to fight. The worship and idolatry of nations and the people claiming to help you are the same ones who helped enslave you. Get out of this game while you still can. The next square on this game board is the world stage. The difference with the Trump saga, that is different from practically any operation we have seen in the past, is the choice to run this one exoterically, in front of the public, as opposed to covertly or esoterically, and most being unaware of it. This is being laid out on the world stage in real time. Prior to this movement, all of the operations to instigate change were done in the shadows.
The best way to describe this is that most people think of this movement like improv. The actors are just making it up as they go in real time. This is not improv. This is a polished play that the public is barely paying attention to. But that doesn't make it any less real or effective. The public is meant to get involved and raise suspicion or show support for this play as opposed to any other operation they needed to get done regardless of the people's opinions on it. The same way an IKEA desk has more value than one bought pre-made from a big box store is because you had the hands-on experience of making it. You feel personally invested in it. If the desk falls apart, you feel responsible. I must have missed a nail or didn't screw something in properly. as opposed to blaming the manufacturer when the big box desk breaks.
The world is getting involved in fighting back against the, quote, dark side and tyranny, essentially building their own desk, just as IQA taught them to. Q's last post on December 18th of 2020, before moving into its next phase, was a link to the Twisted Sister song, We're Not Gonna Take It. General Michael Flynn, the one Anons look up to like a sort of military commander, also called the People's General, used this song in July of 2021 in several of his speaking events.
Hey, I'm General Mike Flynn, and we are not going to take it anymore.
General Michael Flynn! We ain't gonna
Around the world, Anons used this as their rally cry in protest. The problem is they're forcing the public to jump from the pan and into the fire. They want to scare you into running from the dark and into the light trap that they've set for you. This is the reaction phase of a dialectic. Now the question becomes, why make everyone get involved or participate? Well, that's simple. This operation could essentially be called Operation Light. The theme of it is dark to light, making the world aware of the dark by shining a light on it. They need humanity to believe that they are the solution.
There's a Messiah-like figure, whether or not it's Q themselves or Trump or whoever, and there's a great big biblical battle between good and evil. What's cool with QAnon that's not so cool with, religion per se, is that if you're religious and you're fighting this battle between good and evil, all you have to do is be a good Christian or be a good Jewish person or be whatever religion it is. But QAnon gives you an active part to play because the showdown is happening right now.
The crux of the Q phenomenon is we have to get involved to fix this. It's Bob the Builder mentality. Can we fix it? Yes, we can! Show the people the problems and expect them to fix it. When really, it's just forcing the reaction to the problem to achieve the solution. By attempting to fix the world as a collective, you're playing their game. Again, where is Jesus in this narrative? I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Bible is clear. Humanity cannot and will not save itself. You can stop believing their narratives, dark and light, and start trusting Jesus and his promises. He is our Savior. Have you heard of devolution? Chances are, we're living through it right now.
The Executive Order. Governance and integration of federal mission resilience. On December 7th, 2020, Donald Trump signed Executive Order 13961, Governance and Integration of Federal Mission Resilience. This executive order was released simultaneously with the Federal Mission Resilience Strategy 2020, which we'll refer to as the strategy. I believe that by the end of this video, you will see that between the Federal Mission Resilience Executive Order and the strategy, the entire framework for devolution has been sitting in the Federal Register for everybody to see since December 7th, 2020. Allow me to prove it to you. Executive Order 13961 of December 7th, 2020. This executive order begins by telling us under what authority Trump has issued it. In addition to the Constitution, the laws of the United States, the National Security Act of 1947 is mentioned specifically. The National Security Act of 1947 is found in Chapter 44 of the United States Code, Title 50, War and National Defense. In the very first paragraph, we are made aware of the context that this executive order is being issued in. Throughout the entire Federal Mission Resilience Executive Order, the phrase natural disaster is never mentioned. Yet, the context of war and national defense is immediately clarified. This is very important. The entire basis for this executive order is discussing continuity of government during war, and you will see more proof of this as we continue.
Devolution is one avenue of continuity of government should anything happen to compromise national security. It's like an interim government. An anon that calls himself Patel Patriot, after Kash Patel, who worked for the Trump administration, has been writing a series on the continuity of government plans he believes President Trump put in place before he left office called devolution. All parts of the entire series released so far are linked below. Essentially, the theory states that then-President Trump devolved the government, meaning he remains his advisor, but the military and certain civilians are in charge of the government through regional offices around the United States. It is to preserve national security only. This doesn't cover local government.
An executive committee was formed under this executive order, and they each have specific duties to carry out the continuity of government plans. These are the members of the committee. You may recognize some of them.
I want you to know about these facts so you have a more well-rounded idea of what's going on. We are now moving into the action phase of Operation Light, if you will. So this was just a brief glimpse of some of the information within the Devolution series. Read it yourself and come to your own conclusions. An interesting side note is that the final Q drop was posted the day after the government was allegedly devolved, December 8th of 2020. Another avenue to pay attention to is that the Durham investigation is active and has already produced indictments. Not to mention the pending fallout from his laptop, Odysee stepping down as Twitter CEO, both Cuomo's fired, and multiple CEOs from corporations like Walmart and American Airlines, as well as Julian Assange's extradition from the UK to the United States. And she was found guilty. Q-post number 4566 from July 2nd of 2020 regarding Maxwell says, "Do not think today, but rather after today. One leads to another, to another, to another. One leads to many." So this outcome was known over a year ago. They're just moving pieces on the board. This is another example of at the highest levels, there are no sides. There is a common goal that is reached by the use, and in this case disposal, of players on either of their sides. Back to devolution.
Continuity of government hinges on America being at war. Trump referred to himself as being a wartime president and at war with an invisible enemy several times. He's saying this under the guise of this, saying it's worse than Pearl Harbor and the World Trade Center. When Q and Trump referred to this, they were rarely talking about an illness. They were esoterically referring to the attack on America by Zionist ideals. Zionism is a political ideology, not a race.
My father pointed out to me, I did not need to be a Jew to be a Zionist, for I am.
The insanity we've been living through the past 2 years has nothing to do with this. It's just the excuse for tyranny, and for you to become personally victimized, as in aware of that tyranny.
Trump referred to the epidemic of 1917, which the media was quick to criticize, saying the Spanish flu was in 1918. He was never talking about the Spanish flu. On the contrary, in 1917, Russia underwent 2 revolutions culminating with the Bolshevik Revolution in October, also called Red October, which plunged Russia into communism by inaugurating the Soviet regime, or this was when the dark side took over. The Bolsheviks were renamed the Communist Party after seizing power in the October Revolution of 1917. It should be noted the vast amount of times Q-drops have referred to Red October in the context of the revolution. Anons believe over the last few years, Q had been warning of the takeover of America to install Zionist ideology.
Looking back on everything that has happened this year, it all makes sense why the Q operation had to start in 2017 and gather its followers by disseminating its information regularly. The censorship lockdown, in a way, is a direct result of this mass awakening. It was all preparation for what's happening today. Nothing could be accomplished if he was in office, and the MSM wouldn't allow it. The 4 years of him were the prophecy years, the years setting up the game. It looks like we were at the beginning of the implementation of the plan. It's only going to continue to change from here on out. The longer this game goes on, the more money the Waters will get, so it's wisest to get out now. The religion of politics has no answers for you. This world is not fixable by humans like you and me. Jesus is the only answer, and the Bible has told us how all of this ends. So don't get caught up in the propaganda of the dark, but also be hyper-vigilant against the light side. The Brotherhood network has usurped the word light, and it will only cause more confusion as time goes on. That's why we're here today, talking about all the ways this false light is just that, false. It has nothing to do with the God of creation, nor of the actual truth or the light of the world, Jesus Christ. While there are many light-sided players like Dan Scavino, who posted this recently, and Jim Jordan, let's focus on just one, General Flynn, and when he led the Anons to take the oath. Q posted an oath on June 24th of 2020 instructing the Anons to take the oath. On July 4th, General Flynn led by example and showed his digital army how to take the oath.
Where we go one, we go all.
Where we go one, we go all.
God bless America.
God bless America.
He's also one of the people that's exchanging the definition of light in most people's minds for its mystic imposter. Flynn promoted this video on his Telegram channel for the Reawaken America tour.
Because I have upheld this country to spread the light to the rest of the world. This was sacred to God.
Now is the time to act.
This is exactly why I need some action from my people.
While speaking on the Flyover Conservative podcast on July 13th of 2021, Flynn said,
"We are in a battle between darkness and light."
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If people want to stay in the dark, then be prepared for the consequences of darkness.
Right.
I do not wish to stay in the dark. I want to see the light. But being in the light also allows exposure of the truth, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And light connotes truth. Darkness connotes evil, and evil is a lack of understanding and a lack of truth in our society.
Yep.
And this is not just for Christians. This is for anybody who fears, who's in fear today, to move toward the light. Move toward the light. Find the light. And the first light to find is the light in yourself.
Woo! That's so good.
That's amazing.
And on September 17th of 2021, General Flynn spoke at the Opening the Heavens conference in Omaha, Nebraska. The theme of the conference was, "It is time to get ready for the revolution of light." Here is the message he had to convey.
We are your instrument of those sevenfold rays and all your archangels. All of them.
And I am the instrument of those sevenfold rays and archangels, and I will not retreat. I will take my stand.
We will not retreat. We will stand our ground.
I will not fear to speak.
We will not fear to speak.
And I will be the instrument of God's will, whatever it is.
We will be the instrument of your will. Whatever it is.
In the name of Archangel Michael and his legions, I am freeborn, and I shall remain freeborn.
In your name, and the name of your legions, we are freeborn, and we shall remain freeborn.
And I shall not be enslaved by any foe within or without.
And we shall not be enslaved by any foe. Within or without. So help me God. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you very much.
General Flynn recited Theosophist Elizabeth Clare Prophet's channeled message from 1984 nearly verbatim. Elizabeth's full original speech can be found linked below. It begins by stating the following message is channeled from whom they believe is Archangel Michael, whom Michael Flynn was named after.
In the name of Sanat Kumara, Lord Gautama Buddha, Lord Maitreya Jesus Christ, and Kuthumi, beloved Archangel Michael, we summon you into action now, and by the authority of our own mighty I Am Presence in Christ's self, we say, I am Michael, Michael, Michael.
That's Elizabeth in between her photos of Ascended Masters Sananda Maitreya and Saint Germain. Shiva the Destroyer is at her feet. After a 45-minute chanting session to invoke an entity, this is how the channeled message began.
Hail, hosts of the Lord! I am Michael, Prince of the Archangels. I salute you, minute men and women of Saint Germain, freedom fighters of the ages. I salute you, who are the spokesmen of liberty, and I am here to reinforce the protection of the light bearers and the binding of those hordes of darkness.
And this is what I mean about false light. I hope you are now able to discern the difference between Jesus and this false light of Lucifer. Jesus does not coexist with these mystic philosophies and their various implementations such as nationalism or dominionism, amongst many others. Flynn has attempted to defend himself from those calling his speech an occult prayer. The problem is, the only thing he addressed is the use of the 7 rays within the Catholic Church. He used Wikipedia as his source. However, he conveniently ignored its origins and skipped right to the modern usage within the Catholic Church. What it actually says is that the 7 rays are seen early in the Western mystery traditions, such as Gnosticism and Mithraism, before becoming incorporated into the Catholic Church. And if you recall, Saint Germain is known as the Shohan of the 7th ray. They're also a large part of theosophy. This is an example of ignoring the Luciferian origins of problematic religious concepts. Even more, he created a strawman argument to avoid accountability for purposefully plagiarizing a theosophist's channeled message. So why does this channeled message matter? 1, it was deliberate. And 2, because it links all of these light players together, Flynn with Q via the oath and confirming Q drops. And no, Flynn is not Q. There is no one person that is Q. It is a movement, an operation. Like V for Vendetta says, it is an idea. Anyone telling you otherwise is a sorry excuse for a researcher. There is Q and there are anons. QAnon is a deep state psyop to confuse and discredit the, quote, movement. Q with Trump and the military. Q Trump military with theosophical ideas. Theosophy with Saint Germain with Freemasonry. Freemasonry with the Universal Brotherhood with the mystery religion of the light being the false light of Lucifer.
2 Timothy 4:3-4 states, "For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths." And Matthew 7:15-18 says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit."
These light-sided characters may stand there and say things like, God wins, quote a scripture here or there, or give you hope for a promising future, but their actions are that of reciting mystic channeled messages, self-aggrandizement, shifting your focus to self-liberation, and achieving the synthesis of absorbing the last scraps of historic Christianity by replacing it with their mystic impostor religion of false light worship. Their fruit is Luciferian. You can't take anything at face value. Nothing is what it seems. If you are playing this dualistic game, the Esoteric Network will always be one step ahead of you, to deceive you at every turn. And what's worse is that so many love playing the game. They're addicted to the fear or the false hope. They don't want to hear the truth. Unfortunately, that doesn't just apply to those who have chosen to reject Jesus. This applies to a majority of churchgoers who do not realize that their churches have been usurped for decades by the Brotherhood network, who created and funded seminaries. The majority of pastors today may not be in an occult order, but they were taught doctrines by those who were. We have seen the end product of this generational infiltration with those who claim to love Jesus, but they may not realize how incompatible he is with this Luciferian theosophical movement of false light worship disguised as political vengeance. By being ignorant of the occult's belief systems and their polaristic doctrine, and believing if all that is bad and evil falls into the dark, then Jesus must be the light side. God is not on an axis of dark to light. By putting Jesus on the same axis as his adversary, you accept the Kabbalistic motto, Demon est Deus inversus, or the devil is God upside down. And that's the inconvenient reality. So to wrap up all we've discussed in this video, there is no darkness in God. He is not on the dark to light axis. He is holy. He doesn't have an axis of dark to light. He is the light of the world, and we do not need any light apart from him. As well as, in the end, at the highest esoteric levels, there is no black or white, no individual pieces working independently. It is simply the checkerboard floor. It is a completed piece. It's just a matter of moving the pieces around. The only way to win this game is to stop playing. No one has escaped being initiated into the mystery religion of the light unless they have been saved and born again by the living God and his Son, Jesus Christ. You have to get out of this dualistic Luciferian kingdom of Mystery Babylon. If you still have polarized thinking of we are the good, they are bad, it is us versus them, you're still in the game. Observe it. Don't emotionally invest in it. God has no pole, so our allegiance is not with either side. God is free from the dualistic chaos, and you can be too.
The longer things go on, the clearer the picture will become as long as you don't buy into it. If you're still playing, it will only get more and more confusing. Remember, dialectics unfold over time. This is true of a movie script or a novel. You're not told all the details up front, there'd be no story. The mind game's narratives are no different. On the other hand, the Bible has given us the entire story from start to finish.
We don't live in an episode of SpongeBob where the story starts over every day you wake up. What happened last year, last week, and next year are all part of the overall dialectic of the Luciferian story they're crafting. That's the totality Hegel stated. Here is a good mental exercise. Imagine, the internet goes down, it's just gone. All your sources are gone. I'm not saying this is going to happen at all. I don't have any kind of evidence or proof of that. This is just a mental exercise. But what do you actually know when it comes down to the wire? Make some physical notes. Practice presenting information out loud. Can you explain it well enough? What questions might someone ask you? Or do you need to use some time to learn a little bit more? And here we are, the brave new world order. This is the final stop on the board game. The brave new world order. Everyone knows the proverbial fear of the coming new world order. I believe it's easy to conclude that we have been living in the Dark's new world order for about a generation, if not longer. Why would we be going somewhere we already are? As I stated earlier, decisions are made by the organizations, private suppliers, and individuals in control of politics and who possess the power to manipulate money. The last 2 years the world has endured has shown how much control they actually have over everyone and everything. This isn't new, we're just being made aware of it. And what happens after you are aware of something? It's inverted. The mental transmutation from dark to light, from lead to gold. This inversion is the brave new world order. Or, as the occultists call it, the new Atlantis, or the age of Aquarius, the golden age, which is what they have always been trying to get back to, as we've stated many times. Q drop number 2450 reads, "We are going to show you a new world. Those who are blind will soon see the light. A beautiful, brave new world lies ahead. We take this journey together, one step at a time." Everyone is mentally prepared for the Dark's version of reality, the Great Reset world. I'm telling you, you need to prepare for that world to disappear.
The problem is never the solution. Start considering what the Great Awakening world might look like. That is the desired synthesis. It's time to break up with the dystopian narrative of the future and realize the coming false light utopia was the plan all along. If you're so set on this dystopia, you'll think being saved from it by the light is a good thing. It's not. It's all a trap. It's all meant to glorify Lucifer and distract us from the truth.
The Book of Revelation tells us Mystery Babylon falls. The whole thing, dark and light sides, the first and second beast system, they both lose. Whenever things turn upside down and appear to be going right side up, realize it's just a pole shift from dark to light. The overall goal of magic is that everything has its light and shadow elements. The objective is to maximize the light while minimizing the shadow.
Begin to consider what this world will look like now, so when it does begin and the dominoes fall, you won't be thinking, this sounds like a good thing. How could this be bad? Be careful if you find yourself wanting to be part of that new republic of light that was transmuted from the dark. They want you to focus on remaining in this world, invested in it, and take your eyes off of Jesus' return. Will you reject it and all its offers and promises and instead choose the eternal kingdom of heaven? Romans 8:5. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit.
Mentally prepare for everything to change. I don't know how fast of a change it will be, but I do know that we are entering into the most spiritually dangerous era the world has ever lived through. The deception rate is so high and the resistance is so low that many are understandably desperate for justice, for relief from the fear and terror, and for hope for a better future, that anything that appears to save us from this present darkness will seem miraculous. Even car insurance commercials are teaching you how this story goes.
A classic Hollywood story. We meet the hero, the all-new Nissan Frontier. Tension builds, and the hero prevails. In Hollywood, this would be the end. But out here, we're just getting started.
I've seen this movie before.
You have?
Sure. This is the part where all is lost and the hero searches for hope. Then a mysterious figure reminds her that she has the Farmer's Home Policy Perk guaranteed replacement cost and that her home will be rebuilt.
So when things change and it appears better days are on the horizon, or the oppressors of today become yesterday's news, beware of how we got there.
Lastly, get serious about Scripture. This is not the deception before the Antichrist kingdom or any other Masonic idea. The Bible is clear. There are two beasts in Revelation 13. Read all of chapter 13 to know why this light side is so dangerous. And Mystery Babylon falls once in Revelation 18. This is the time of the rise of the false prophet system, that second beast, the one looking like a lamb but speaking like a dragon, that pseudo-Christos spirit John warned of, and after its time, Jesus Christ returns.
I've already discussed this in my video, The Antichrist Investigation. The point is to stop venerating the power of Lucifer by giving his fear-mongering any of your peace, and start believing the power of the Almighty God who has already defeated this game. He is the one you want to be with, the victor over it all, not a part of either of the losing teams.
Watch what's happening and what's going to happen in the world with a discerning eye. Learn to do your own research so you can make your own informed decisions. Most importantly, realize that you are in a deadly game, especially if you continue to be part of either side, the light or the dark. Stop playing, ask God for forgiveness, and follow Jesus. In John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. No one means no one. There are not many paths to God and eternal life. There's only one, Jesus.
If you have escaped this mind game, you know that it can seem lonely at times, but I want to let you know that you are not alone. There are others getting out every day, and those of us who have gotten out can use our time to help get others out by coming out of Mystery Babylon, being set apart, and sharing the truth and the life-saving, transforming Word of God. Thanks for watching this video. I know it was a lot to digest, but since I don't post very often, I try to pack as much as I can in one video for you to be able to re-watch and find something new to research or to apply to what's going on each time. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.